A long shift ends. A professional comes home, closes the door, and quietly pours a drink alone in the kitchen. For millions of people, this isolated, hidden routine is the standard experience of alcohol consumption. Human beings have consumed fermented beverages for nearly 9,000 years, yet the instinct to consume them in secret, away from the eyes of the community, is a remarkably modern development. In ancient Mesopotamia, alcohol was a basic requirement for survival. The laborers who built the great monuments of Sumeria received daily rations of beer as part of their compensation. It was a public staple, treated with the same necessity as bread or water. By the time of the ancient Greeks, wine anchored civic and intellectual life. The symposium was a formal, public drinking gathering where ideas were debated, culture was transmitted, and citizens built their social networks. In colonial America, the tavern operated as the central community institution. These spaces doubled as courthouses, post offices, and polling places. Deals were sealed with whiskey in plain sight, and laborers were routinely paid in rum. For the vast majority of human history, alcohol consumption was a public activity. It existed out in the open, serving as a pillar of social connection and community survival. That public relationship with alcohol held steady until the Industrial Revolution transformed the American economy, dramatically increasing the physical stakes of impairment. In an agricultural society, a man who drank heavily might lose a day's productivity on his own farm, a consequence largely contained to his family. Place that same impaired worker in a factory operating heavy machinery, and he becomes a lethal threat to everyone around him. Industrialization escalated the consequences of impairment from a personal inconvenience to a mass casualty danger. Society was forced to intervene and regulate drinking in ways it never had before. At the same time, the damage of alcohol abuse fell heavily on women and children. With almost no legal rights or protections, women organized the temperance movement as a practical fight for physical and financial survival. To win their campaign, these reformers built a powerful argument that reframed drinking as a deep character flaw. They successfully categorized intoxication as a moral sin and a personal failure. This moral momentum produced the 18th Amendment in 1920. The manufacture and sale of intoxicating liquors was prohibited nationwide, a sweeping attempt to solve the alcohol problem through total elimination. Prohibition immediately created a massive black market. Organized crime transformed into a national institution, while the quality of illegal, unregulated liquor became dangerously toxic. Making alcohol illegal made it fashionable and prestigious in certain circles. Drinking culture migrated from the public saloon into the hidden environment of the speakeasy, shifting the social meaning of taking a drink. 13 years later, the experiment was repealed. But the legacy of prohibition endured, embedding the connection between alcohol misuse and moral failure deep within the American consciousness. For decades after Prohibition, drunk driving remained a lightly punished offense. That changed in 1980, when Mothers Against Drunk Driving redefined the act. They successfully argued that driving impaired was a deliberate choice and a violent crime. State legislatures responded with mandatory minimum sentences and strict license suspensions, and a national standard that eventually set the legal blood alcohol limit at 0.08. For one group of professionals, the regulatory response went further. Commercial drivers operating under federal law faced the ultimate example of modern zero-tolerance policy. The standard legal driving limit is 0.08, but the DOT commercial driver threshold is exactly half that, 0.04. Penalties follow conviction automatically. A first offense triggers a mandatory 1-year license disqualification. A second offense results in a lifetime ban. Your commercial license never clocks out. These frameworks achieve their goal, driving down fatalities and saving lives. However, combining extreme career-ending consequences with a lingering moral shame has created an environment where professionals are terrified to admit they need help. When the stakes of exposure mean losing your livelihood and your reputation, human beings adapt. This intense pressure gives rise to the high-functioning pattern of alcohol misuse. High-functioning individuals show up on time and meet every external obligation. They use sheer discipline to ensure their work gets done, maintaining a professional facade that deflects any outside suspicion. But underneath that performance, a physiological shift is happening. As the individual uses alcohol to manage stress or sleep, the brain actively adapts. Over time, it requires constantly increasing amounts of alcohol to reach the same baseline of relief. The high-functioning pattern acts as a self-concealing mechanism. Because external performance remains intact, the individual often fails to recognize their own escalating internal crisis until a violation occurs. The true danger of stigma is secrecy. It forces individuals to isolate and hide their growing dependency, out of fear that honesty will destroy the careers they spent years building. Scientific evidence shows that alcohol use disorder is a chronic brain disease. Repeated use physically alters the brain's reward processing and impulse control. An individual struggling to stop is responding to a biological adaptation. The early warning signs of this adaptation are internal. They look like regularly drinking more than you planned, or experiencing unexplained irritability when you consider skipping a day of drinking. Acknowledging these internal shifts is a professional exercise in the exact same rigorous self-assessment required by safety-sensitive work. By removing the shame, we make it possible to ask for help early, ensuring a private habit never has the chance to become a public tragedy.